everybody. So we are going to go over how to make country bread today. We went over how to start a starter and basics of starter feeding. So hopefully you've been doing that for a few days. You've got some rhythm to it now, some rise and fall, some activity in your starter. And where do you go from there? So we are going to go over the country bread recipe in the original Tartine bread book. So that's right here on page 48. The ingredients are pretty straightforward. It's just flour, water, and salt, and some of your levain. You need some minimal tools here. You need a big bowl to be mixing the dough in. A scale is very handy for weighing this out. I'm going to go over weighing today. If anybody has questions about how those translate to volume, we can get into that later. But just for the sake of simplicity, we're going to be weighing all our ingredients today. Dough scrapers. You guys have probably seen me use this little plastic dough scraper a few times. This is extremely handy if you're making dough all the time. And this bench knife will be useful when we get to shaping things. Both of these can be found in many different sources. Any cooking store will have them online. Also SFBI, the San Francisco Baking Institute, I know retails those direct to consumer, so those should be pretty easy to find, and if you're going to be baking bread pretty regularly, they're definitely essential. So a little bit before we start about baker's math, because you'll hear me refer to percentages. And just to kind of look at the book here, we have everything by weight, and then there's a little column here that says baker's percentage. What this is measuring all of the ingredients against the total flour. So that 1,000 grams right there, that's our 100%. Everything else is measured against that. So if we say we have 75% hydration, which you guys have all probably heard a lot, that gets spoken about often when making bread, that means that the water is 75% by weight of the flour. So we're starting at 75% hydration because that's a pretty safe start. We can adjust it as we go. But if you're just starting out making country bread, you haven't really done this much before, you can start at 75 and keep it at 75, and that'll give you a pretty sturdy dough, easy to cut, easy to shape, easy to work with. And then as you practice, you can kind of nudge the hydration up there until you find a dough that's a little bit more extensible and softer, and that'll give you more loft and more open crumb, kind of the wetter you get. So page 48, handy recipe. And I'm just gonna go right into it. So I'm gonna start my bowl on here. I'm gonna tare it so that I have 0 grams started here. I'm making a 75% hydration dough, so I'm gonna put 750 grams of water in here. There we go. We're going to measure our levain right on top of that water. So this levain was fed at 9 a.m. and at 11 a.m. and it is now really happy. So we're going to put 200 grams of that in. And as you can see, there's a lot of bubbles in here, and you hear a lot of talking about float test. That just means, is the levain floating in the water or is it sinking in the bottom? This is definitely floating. If anything, this levain may be a little bit far along. Our dough may taste a little tangy tomorrow, but it'll definitely, the acidity is good to a degree because it adds some strength. So you want to get enough acidity to build strong dough without going overboard and having a super mouth-watery kind of tangy dough tomorrow. So I'm gonna tare the scale again, and now I'm gonna put in that 1,000 grams of flour. I'm gonna do 900 grams of our bread flour here. And 100 grams of our whole wheat flour. That gives us our 1,000 gram total. I am not gonna put in the salt yet. So the first step is just to mix the flour, water, and levain together. We're gonna let that rest for 20 minutes once all those dry ingredients are incorporated into the wet. And then we're gonna build a little bit of strength and maybe adjust the hydration before we add any salt. And here's why. The salt kind of affects the feel of the dough. so you have a better sense for how wet it is before you put the salt in. And also it changes how the gluten bonds form. And so you can form stronger gluten bonds before you introduce the salt. So I like to get a little bit of mixing done before the salt gets in, because it'll make it a little stronger and it makes it easier to feel how wet to make the dough. But on this stage, I'm just pre-mixing. I'm not trying to get any development yet. I'm only trying to get the flour wet. A lot of the way that we mix a tartine is letting time do the work instead of manual labor. So instead of, putting the dough on the bench and kneading it to build gluten, we like to kind of just let it rest because it will build as it goes. So that's all the mixing I'm going to do right now to start. You can see right there. So it's just gotten wet. There's no gluten formation yet. We're just going to let it now rest for 20 minutes, let the flour start to hydrate, and then we will get the salt in there and we'll do a little mixing and get the salt in there. So I will see you guys in 20 minutes.